Okay, so we've been moving forward, and you guys have been doing well, and I trust that you continue to be watching. So where were we? We started off. We looked at research problem. We have a research problem. We said we have a problem, and we want to research. And then we wrote the statement of the problem. We have justified that our problem is a real problem. And then we were able to write the purpose statement. So we wrote the purpose statement. And from the purpose statement, then we came up with the research questions that our study is going to be answering. Now, from there, uh, now that we have the research question or the hypothesis that we are to be proving, then we have to be able to collect data for it. So how do we prove what we have? It is through the collection of data that we will have. Now, what kind of data do we want to be collecting? What kind of data do we need to collect? Now, there will be different kind of data that we'll be needing. One of them that you will be probably including is what they call the demographic data. This is data such as the age, the gender, the marital status, occupation, number of years the person has been involved in something, those kind of information that gives you a background to the participants. That will be important data because it helps you to later on in the way you would explain, in the way you will discuss your data, this will be important. It will be important to understand who are you talking about. How much experience do they have? Does the gender make a difference? If the gender makes a difference, then that would also give you an idea in the way you will be interpreting your data. So the demographic information is important for you as well as for the readers of your study. The other data that you'll have will be data related directly with your research questions. So each of the research questions that you have will have to find some data to it to be able to answer it. Now, the thing is, each research question cannot be enough to give you enough data. So, for example, I have this research question here. This will not be the question that I will go and ask my participants in the research to respond to. This is a very broad concept, broad idea, because it says like to what extent do students, for example, in here, students studying at the ACTI-related theological institutions, colleges in Ethiopia, understand themselves to have had transformative learning experience. Now, I want them to tell me to what extent they feel, they perceive to have experienced transformative learning experience while studying at the college. I don't want them to just say yes or no, because that won't be enough for you. What you want to know is you want to know how they have experienced transformative learning experience. But then when you look at transformative learning experience, you have to pause and ask yourself, what does that mean? How do I know? How would I measure transformative learning experience? How can you measure that I have experienced a transformative learning? You should be able to ask yourself, what are the things that would help you to know how much transformation I have experienced? And therefore, in order for you to find the answer for this research question, you probably will have to use several questions, which will be included in your instrument, in your survey, for example. That will give you an information, an idea as to the extent I perceive to have experienced a transformative learning. So transformative learning is a broad concept. You can't get an answer for it with just one question by just saying, what is the transformative learning experience you had? So you have to ask several questions to be able to understand it. Some questions, for example, in this study, the researcher has used 19 questions on a Likert scale to be able to understand how much the student believes or perceives to have experienced transformative learning. But I'll give us here just a couple of them to give us an idea. So this is a Likert scale. It is on a Likert scale. So the Likert scale is this one. So this one's are given to us on a 5-point Likert scale, where it begins with a strongly agree and goes to the other extreme where it is strongly disagree. So the students, the participants, will read each of the questions that you have on this side, and they will respond to you on the basis of this scale. So the researcher here had used 19 of them to be able to understand how much the students or the participants perceive to have experienced transformative learning. So one of the questions that you could use, and the writer has used, is I have learned new things I did not know prior to coming to the college. Another question is I was able to explain concepts I did not know before or was unsure of, and there will be those questions will continue. So you will have more than one question, several questions that will help you to answer your research questions. So that's it. Now with this, we'll move towards the idea of a need to develop an instrument that will help you to get the information, the data that you need. All right. So what is the meaning of data collection? So we have our research questions and we want to collect data to give us the answers, to give us the information, the data that we need in relationship to each of the research questions. So meaning of data collection. It is all about gathering specific information to support or to refute some of the facts. You must have a clear understanding of what you hope to obtain and how you hope to obtain it. So you need to know, what do I want to obtain? You have your research questions and you have to ask yourself, okay, this is my question. What kind of data do I want? So you need to know what you are hoping to obtain and how you hope to get it. You must have a clear vision of the instruments to be used and the respondents. So you need to understand what kind of instruments would I use and who would be the respondents, who would be the participants in my study. The source of data, where would you get your data from? Data's all related with your research questions. Where would you get this data from? There are two major sources. Partly, it's the primary sources. These are primary data is information gathered directly from the respondents. So these are, you will go directly to the respondents and you'll be collecting your data from the respondents, from the participants in your study. And you'll do that using any of these ones here. You may use a questionnaire, you may use an interview, you may use focus group discussions, you may do observations, you may go onto the site and observe how they do. So these are the different ways you may be gathering your data. This will be both qualitative as well as quantitative. Obviously, the questionnaire is mostly used for quantitative. Interviews, focus group discussions, they are qualitative. Observation can be both. Mostly it is qualitative. You're observing, you're seeing how people are doing, how they function. Source of data, the second one is secondary sources. These are sources that are neither collected directly by the user nor specifically for the user. So they're not collected for you and you're not the one who has collected them for yourself, but they are collected by somebody else. But they are useful for you. It involves gathering data that already have been collected by someone else. This involves collection and analysis of published materials, like institutions that have published it, giving you information about the institution, about their own status related to the question that you're raising. Information from a diverse source of documents and electronically stored information related to your study. So these are information that are already published and they are out there and they are related with your study. Steps in data collection. How do we move forward? How do we collect that data? Okay, so reflect on your research approach or the research design. Your research approach will determine what kind of data and how you'll move forward with it. So if it is quantitative, obviously you'll be using a questionnaire, you'll be using a survey. If it is qualitative, you'll be doing interviews, you'll be doing focus groups or observations. So first is, okay, what is my research approach? What is my design? Second, it is define the sample. who's going to be giving me my sample? What would be my sample? What would be the sample size? How many people do I need? So we'll be talking about sample size later on, population and sampling in a minute. But then this is the point. You will have to know who are the people that will give me my data. Identify the respondents and their accessibility. Thirdly, ensure research instruments are ready. So based on what we talked about, okay, you have your research questions and you come up with questions that will give you the data that you need in relationship to each of the research questions. And so with that, you will develop an instrument that you will use for your data collection. Then once you have the instrument, you don't want to just go and give it out. You don't want to just go out and collect the data. What you want to do is you want to spend time. You want to pre-test it. You want to pilot test it. You want to give it to a certain group of people and certain sample group and see if there's anything that you need to work on it. We'll talk about validity and reliability in a minute. Those kind of things, it's important that your instrument is tested for validity and reliability. Okay, if you just send out your instrument, you collect your data, and if the instrument you have is faulty, then that means your data is faulty. And unfortunately, once you have collected the data, then it becomes very difficult to go back to those same people and ask them to collect the data again. And time has already moved, and therefore your whole research, your whole work could be in big trouble. So it's important for you to pilot test your instrument before you actually go out and collect your data. Fifthly, request permission to collect data from the relevant authorities. You can't just go into an institution and begin to collect data, or you can't just go to a person and without that person's consent collect data from that person. It's important for you to gain permission from the person, from the institution that will be giving you the data that you need for your studies. Okay, so this is a general introduction about it. Now, moving forward more specifically onto quantitative measuring instruments, we'll be talking about what kind of data would you be taking, would your instrument take when you're doing a quantitative study. And after a bit, we'll talk about the qualitative one. Maybe I'll give you a video that talks about it. So characteristics of measuring instruments. Instruments are tools used to gather data. Yeah, we've already talked about it. So 3 ways to collect research data, specifically with the quantitative ones. There are standardized instruments. These are instruments that for which validity, reliability has been tested. Somebody has developed it. It has been tested. It is reliable. It is standardized, and you can just take it out and use it. However, when you use standardized instruments, because somebody else has already produced it, it's important that you gain permission to be able to use it. The other one is the modified instrument. So you will be using the standardized instrument, but you will modify it to fit into your context. Even when you modify it, you need to acknowledge that it is not your instrument. It is somebody else's instrument you're using. And therefore, it's important that you get permission from the original developer of that instrument and ask for permission to modify it in certain ways and be able to use it. The third one is self-developed. You would develop it for yourself, for you to use it. But in that case, that means you have to test for validity and reliability. The same with the modified instrument. Because you have changed that instrument, it will be important for you to check for validity. Is that instrument still valid? Is it still reliable? So you will be needing to do that. Quantitative and qualitative data collection methods. Obviously, you can send out surveys, as we said, observations, interviews. These are the different methods that can be used. Now, constructs, what is it? It's definition and abstraction that cannot be observed directly, like I said earlier. Transformative learning. you can't see transformation. You can't see how much I have transformed. Of course, you may be able to see the white hairs. The young man that was nice and handsome with the black hair has become a little bit grayish here. You can see that. But beyond that, you can't see what kind of transformation I have been experiencing. And therefore, that is a construct. That is an abstract idea. And therefore, you need to make it in such a way that it can be measured. And that is called to operationalize it. Let me get my red thing here. It needs to be operationalized. That means you need to be able to state it in such a way it can be measured. So the other ones are the things that we have here that are constructs: intelligence, personality, teacher effectiveness, creativity, achievement, motivation, spiritual maturity. All of these are constructs. These are constructs, and you need to be able to state them in such a way that they can become measurable, meaning they should be operationalized. That is defined in terms of processes or operations that can be observed and measured. And we have seen some examples of it when we looked at transformative learning. When constructs are operationally defined, they become variables. Okay, and so variables, these are measurable characteristic or attribute of an individual or an organization that is being studied, which can be measured, and therefore they can take two or more values to it. Let me say, for example, height, study time. How much time does the person study? How much time does the person spend at work? Weight, monthly income, ministry involvement. All of these ones, they can become how much time that the person spent in studying, in devotions, reading the Bible, those different kind of things. So those become measurable, and they are variables. Now the variables, they can be nominal, or they can be what they call continuous variables. So nominal or categorical or qualitative, these are variables primarily related with qualitative data. The quantitative or the continuous variables, they are categorized as these ones here. They can be ordinal, interval, and ratio. So three different ones of them. Now, what are the nominal variables? The nominal variables, or also called categorical variables, they simply classify persons or objects into two or more categories. Nominal categories include gender, employment status, marital status. Mostly, this will be like the ones that you'd have in your demographic data. Okay, so those ones in your demographic section, they will be nominal variables. If you are to use those ones to do some kind of analysis, then you'll be analyzing nominal variables. The ordinal variables, these are based on the values the variables take. Objects are put based on the values they take. Objects can be put into an order, ordinal, order. So it has to do with order. You'll be able to put them into an order from the lowest or to the most least, that kind of thing. So ordinals describe performance as higher, lower, better, or worse, but they do not indicate by how much they are. So you can say he performed the worst, but it doesn't tell you how much worse, by how much he has been worse. Intervals between the ranks are not equal. So he's the worst, he's excellent, but the space between the worst, the one that's performing well in between, and the best, there's no equal intervals. For example, the difference between rank 1 and 2 is not necessarily equal to rank 2 and 3, like in the classroom setting. Students who come out first, students who come out second and third. If you look at by how much did the second one become second as compared to the first one, the interval between the two may not necessarily be the same as the interval between the second and the third. That means the interval, the space between them is not equal, but it gives them a rank. So it says first, second, third. but the space in between is not necessarily equal. So those kind of variables are called ordinal variables. So an example is class rank. I've already said that. Economic status, we can say he is in the low economic status, medium, high, but then the rank between them, the interval between the low and the medium and the high may not necessarily be of equal interval. They may not be equal, but then you can rank it, you can order it. He is of low income, she is of a medium income, and she is on the high income, but then the intervals between them may not necessarily be equal. So one cannot tell the difference between the different levels. So those are the ordinal. And then we have the interval variables. As the name itself shows, tells you interval, they will be of equal intervals. So you have the variables, the values they take will be of equal intervals. Has all the characteristics of the ordinal. They can be ordered and ranked as well. It also has equal intervals. So between the different ones, between the different elements in that order, there will be an equal interval. Most of the tests used in the educational research, such as agreement, when you want to check how much, to what extent do you agree? So the agreements can be on intervals. Usually we use the Likert scales. Level of satisfaction, we do the same. Attitude tests, they are all treated as interval variables. For example, here, this ones will be intervals. So you may be using 0 to 20 to see the performance in maths. So you see 0 to 20, and then the next one is 21 to 40, 41 to 60. So you can see the intervals are of equal intervals between this one. And so here you have 20, the next one has 20, the next one has 20. So each one of them has equal intervals. Or this one, which is what we call the Likert scale. On Likert scale, customer satisfaction, completely agree, somewhat agree, and then in the middle we have the neutral. Okay, the neutral. So completely agree goes parallel to this one, completely disagree. Somewhat agree goes with somewhat disagree, and this one will be in the middle. So this is of equal interval, and therefore they are referred to as intervals. It does not have a true zero. You don't have a zero. You have a middle, the so-so kind of thing, but they don't have a true zero to them. The last one is the ratio variables. This one, it's similar to the intervals in that they are ordered with equal intervals. They mainly encompass physical measures such as height, mass, distance, those kind of things. And they would have, and others where real zero is possible. So weight, there can be a real zero to it. Example, what is your weight in kilograms? 50 kgs, those kind of things. These ones, they can give you rank, order, they will give you equal intervals, and there will be a possibility of a true zero to it.